Peter Himmelman, Pesach Mordechai. Your background is diverse, but first, how do you like to be called, Peter?
Well, it depends. The real intimates sometimes call me Pesach Mordechai. My mom would occasionally call me that. And it's a term of endearment, so you take your pick. Maybe Peter is just the standard informal way to do it.
Peter, you're in your 60s. You're born and raised in St. Louis Park, Minnesota, from what I found.
Yes.
You're married to Maria, and you've raised 4 children. How many are married and have kids?
All married, all have kids.
Wow, you're a blessed man.
Thank God for that.
Are they near you?
They're a little bit distant, yeah. Never too far from my heart, but spread out.
Peter, you're a singer, songwriter, musician. You played in an indie rock band before pursuing an extensive solo career. I'm not telling you anything you don't know.
Thank you for reminding me all this.
You're also a film and television music composer. You've been nominated for Emmy and Grammy Awards. In addition, you're a talented painter, and you've written children's books, a book of creativity, poetry, autobiography. On top of that, I found that you founded the Big News, a company that helps organizations leverage the power of their people's innate creativity. I don't know what it means, but it sounds impressive.
It sounds good, right? I'm not even sure what it means. And I wrote it.
Yeah, these are all great achievements, but my interest lies in your Jewishness and your activities as a Jew. What kind of a Jew are you, Pesach Mordechai? How would you define yourself?
Well, that's a broad and deep question at the same time. I would think that I'm a Jew that aspires to connect with God at every moment, who is connected to our very laudable past, the Jewish peoplehood, to the Torah, to the strengths and resilience of the Jewish people. I strive to be connected to that. None of it was difficult for me, because growing up I understood exactly who I was and to whom I belonged to. My identity was certain, even though I took various paths and little rumspringers away from this at times. And how's that for the beginning of an answer?
Well, it sounds that we can discuss this for the rest of the hour.
That sounds good. Sounds right.
It's easy to say you're Orthodox, conservative, or you are flexible,
I would be, striving to be an observant Jew, and I'm very proximate to Chabad. I met the Rebbe on several occasions, and that was very fundamental to my turn into more observance.
Told you to do mincha, right?
Told me to do mincha. Did you hear about that, right?
Yeah.
He just said, start to do more.
Yeah.
And that was, almost 40 years ago.
With few bottles of vodka, I guess.
I think there were 3 in line. Who told you about that? Simon?
Well, I interviewed Simon, but he didn't tell me about it. He didn't, he said, what happens with Peter stays with Peter.
That's good.
We met in LA about 20 years ago, and I thought you were a cool guy. But by the time we got reacquainted back in September at your 92nd Street Y appearance, I realized that you're much more than just a talented musician. How has your life changed in the past 20, 30, 10, 15 years? How have you evolved during this time?
Let's just start from the more recent evolution. I don't think I'm alone in the people that would say of themselves that they had changed somewhat after the events of October 7th, 23. And that is when I sort of took the gloves off in a way, or unfurled much more of my Jewishness, not only in public and the things that I write about and speak about, but even in my own private way of thinking about being part of the Jewish people.
Part of the October 8th drive?
Yeah, there's a lot of people who are propelled by that. You know, I hardly know a Jewish person who was not deeply influenced by that horrible day. So, I mean, you know, when I was a kid, my aspirations were to become a rock star. And then once I achieved some level of success, I had different major labels that I was signed to, made a bunch of records. Right around that time, when I got signed to my first label, my dad had died just before that. My dad was a heroic figure to me, a very proud Jew, an ex-Marine, an entrepreneur, a brilliant person, but also a very loving person, self-effacing, loved people, and people literally loved him. And when he died, it was, I suppose every young death is always a tragedy, but for me, for my siblings, for my mom, it was a real tragedy. It just was this gaping hole that is hard to fill. And from then on, I became a little bit more serious in my music. I wrote about things that were more serious, not necessarily melancholy or maudlin, but I started to think about my place in the world. What was it that I wanted to speak about? And then I got married and had children, and that is the most transformative thing I think you can do, aside from your own birth and your own leaving the world. That decision is the only one that you can make.
It's the only one that's irreversible.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's reversible. I've seen it a lot. But it is akin to those two ones that are not reversible. So I take it seriously. Let's put it that way.
So you've become a serious guy for somebody who is usually informal and easygoing. So you encompass those two yin yang of, you know, serious man, but which actually comes from your town, right?
Yeah, that's right. The Coen brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see myself as a somber person, but, you know, there's a very serious side, which sometimes I'm, you know, profanely funny with my close friends, and they also understand that is a form of seriousness too.
It sounds like a paradox. As a poet yourself, you'll appreciate this. I heard this line that only a poet can hold a paradox in his hands.
That's right. I mean, because
you can be serious and easygoing at the same time.
Humor is itself a serious thing. It's simply the juxtaposition of unlikely events, circumstances in time. They smash together like flint and it creates a spark.
It's interesting because that's the switch of entertainment to begin with, because once upon a time, entertainers were gestures. They were just bringing the light side to life for those who patron them. But we are living in a time where, you know, entertainment, movies, music, you know, and the likes are serious business for serious people.
Yeah, I don't really think of myself as an entertainer. Never did. I don't think of my songs as entertainment, although they can be very entertaining, as can I. But I don't find it, in my mind, entertainment is something that sort of plucks you away from the world.
I mean it in a sense that you're not cooking, you're not changing tires, you're not flying planes. You belong to that, you know, broad.
Well, I'm always cooking, so I'm in there. But yeah, no, I get what you're saying, and I think it probably behooved me to look up the etymology of entertainment. It's probably more serious than we allow that word to be.
You know, Peter, what got my attention that made it really important to reach out to you and have this session is you're almost daily writing on your blog mostly about your experience as a Jew. The blog is Peter Himmelman, Morning Music on Substack. In your writings, you're heavily involved in defending Jews and Israel against the vicious anti-Semitic attacks from right and left. You are one of the few vocal celebrities that defend Jews and Israel. You do this very eloquently, but at some point I started to wonder, are you hoping to change people's mind, or are you just venting your frustration just like the rest of us?
Well, that's a good question. I am not looking to change anyone's mind any more than I'm looking for a tree to speak to me. But I am trying to, and in some ways perhaps with some success, helping to give voice to Jewish people, to empower them to speak aloud or write the things that they want to say. I get a lot of mail saying, thank you for putting into words what I'm thinking. That's my purpose.
That's beautiful. And, as somebody who lives in a community and shares a lot of connection with people who like-minded people, I find that there's an echo chamber of people who just share the same thing.
My things go out pretty broadly, so particularly on Facebook, it's a very broad format, and I get a lot of different people who are not necessarily Jewish who are saying, thank you for writing this. But as I said, one of the things that you hear a lot about, and it's important, is anti-Semitism, or anti-Judaism, as I like to say. I don't like to use that word, anti-Semitism. It's a German-created word that was intended to foster anti-Judaism. But the focus on anti-Judaism is in some ways disproportionate to the conversation around pro-Judaism. Why be Jewish? What is it that we're defending so ardently? What are the values that we have? What are the ancient rituals that have been carried through for almost 3,500 years? Somebody said, I'm going to wear one of those yellow release the hostage pins, which are great. And I said, why don't you also wear a yarmulke or put on tefillin? And that might have been a little too much for that person. But why not take the immutable traditions that we've been given for thousands of years, those that have kept us together as a people? Why not consider those at this time, along with, not in despite all the work that needs to be done for anti-Judaism and the protection of Jewish lives? Why not explore what Judaism has to offer?
I like that. So you turn it, you doubled up, a pun on double down, You doubled up on instead of being defensive, you said this is an opportunity to ask ourselves who we are and why we're doing it.
This is something I've thought about for years and years. All the money that would seem to be donated to the cause of anti-Semitism, which is a worthy cause, I donate to such causes. But in lieu of donating or spending time or empowering those things which are fundamental to our peoplehood, you're missing the other half of the story.
I haven't heard that approach, but I think it behooves us to use this October 8th and this rise in anti-Semitism to wake us up. And I like the way you framed it.
People are waking up, in quotes, to the idea that people hate the Jews or whatever it is. That's not the point. That's a very sort of not useful point of view. We're waking up to that, and then what? And now what? What is the proactive, positive measure that we're taking?
Yeah, I like that. However, in all of your writings, there is also an apologetic side. You always make sure that you don't give Israel a blank pass. In your many writings, you keep referring to your critical views of what Israel has done, kind of a balancing act. I know that Israel is not a saint.
It's a very broad statement that should be, self-evident. But I'm not critiquing political policies or military strategies or anything.
But I wonder what you are critiquing, because it's also important.
Well, there's a lot of things to critique about Israel. It's a country of human beings.
Right.
One of the things that is not a criticism, it's just a need, is for, as it would be for the continuance of any society, what are the meeting points? Where are divisions? Can they be made less stringent? Where is the brotherhood, the sororal aspect that was around on October 8th?
Yeah.
How do we get that back as a constant? How do we get that feeling without having our people murdered? And by the way, this is another important point that I like to bring out in a lot of my writing, which is, it's not for me about Israelis. If this were happening to Jews in Toledo, Ohio, or Shanghai, or Toronto, I would feel the exact same way. It's about Jews under attack.
I think it's about humans everywhere. We are in a trend of division, both in America, in Europe, in Israel, and Western society. We lost the glue that connects us, and there are many reasons for that. And you are right to point out for the need of bridging the differences, because there's so much more that connects us and unites us.
Well, this is I don't think it's an apocryphal tale, but it's something I heard that informs my thinking. When the telegraph lines were placed between, let's say, Boston and, somewhere in South Carolina, and a telegraph, just to know, it's not a funny old antiquated thing. It was as modern a technology as artificial intelligence.
Revolution. It was a
revolutionary, right? People lose sight of that. And the thinking was, and this is just as apropos of what you're saying about divisions, the thinking was that this increased, enhanced immediacy of communication will help create peace and diminish some of these divisions. Well, it so happened when the lines were finally laid, the first shots were fired at Fort Sumter maybe only months later. In other words, because of the speed of information, people did not have time when it was on horseback, let's say, to read a letter and think about it and write a letter that would go back in a slower way, so that we had time to consider our opinions, not be reactive.
We skipped the first 3 drafts where we allowed our fury to.
Yes,
and
exactly.
We woke up the next day and said, I got carried away.
Yeah.
But once you press send.
Right. As Mark Twain said, I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time. It's great.
Pesach Mordechai, my interest has been in the transmission of our tradition, from parents to children, and more importantly, uncovering the influence grandparents have on people's Jewish life. And this has been evident to me a while ago. That's why I started this program about 15 years ago. My interviews have been mostly with rabbis and scholars who've had influence on the Jewish world. But in today's environment, we're looking for role models with whom the younger generation can identify. You identify as an Orthodox Jew, an unlikely trend among rock stars. How did you embark on this religious commitment?
First, I was raised in a home that was not, I didn't know anybody that kept Shabbos. It was not a thing where I grew up. And I didn't really know anyone that kept kosher. And my mother lit Shabbos candles in our house on, with some regularity. We sometimes had like Friday night Kiddush. My grandmother spoke Yiddish. Both of them did.
Kiddush and Yiddish.
Yeah, and so there was a lot of knowing that I'm Jewish. And also, you would get into fights in school. Hey, you Jew, you effing Jew, and you kike, and there'd be swastikas from time to time on the locker. So you knew you were a Jew that way too. It gave you a fighting spirit.
Nothing has changed.
No, well, it's always coming back to the old. So nothing ever really changes because it went under a rug or under a rock. So I was always feeling very Jewish. And my dad got very sick. And when he died, I moved to New York from Minneapolis with my band. And to shorten the story, I got a record deal. It's just something that I always wanted. It was a big record deal. And all of a sudden I had, a lot of money for the first time in my life. And I also met Simon Jacobson. And then I met the Rebbe. And what I learned from those experiences, I can tell you exactly what Simon told me, that literally made me get a talit katan the next day, and later break up not only with my long-term girlfriend who wasn't Jewish, but some of the concubines that I was seeing with my open-ended halacha, which wasn't any kind of halacha, if you know what I mean. But that was a very instrumental thing. I'll tell you what Simon said. I met him at his house. This is almost 40 years ago. We both had hair, darker hair, and we're sitting around his table. It was late at night, and he said, he started talking about, things, and I see the pictures of Rebbe on the wall, and I said to him, what's with this? It seems a little cultish to me. It didn't really seem cultish. I kind of got it, but I just was this is our first meeting. But he looks at me, he's not very upset by what he said at all. He goes, look, he says, he's like an inspirational grandfather figure. I'm like, yeah, this makes sense. Then it gets late it's probably 1 or 2 in the morning now. And he's getting into it. He's talking to me, and it's getting deep. And he starts talking about a tzaddik. And I understood, I wasn't the smartest guy ever, but I understood he wasn't talking about Mel Blumenthal, who gets you, a tzaddik. Oh, he got me such a deal on a car battery. He was talking about something else. And I assumed he was talking about the Rebbe. And he says to me, look, a tzaddik could do anything. And I look at Simon, I go, oh, really? Can he fly? And he looks at me with a serious face now. He says, look, I've never seen anyone flying, but to a tzaddik, whether they're walking on the face of the earth or they're hovering, flying 30, 40, 50 feet above it, what's the difference? It's all a miracle.
You saw the Frisco Kid? The movie?
Yeah.
The Indian asked him, can God bring rain?
Well, he was talking about, just the mindset of a person, and this idea of finding the miraculous in what we so call the mundane was really appealing to me, because this is something I'd thought of without the language as a young kid. That's why they were the fastest to ever get me into the cult, as you say.
About a tzaddik flying, there's a story about the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidut. Yeah. He said he comes to a town, and there's a guy who doesn't know how to daven. He basically reads the Siddur from beginning to end every day, including Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Shavuos every day. And it takes him like 12 hours. And Baal Shem Tov marks the pages where he should do what. And he's very happy. And then the Baal Shem Tov leaves, and all of a sudden this rabbi runs around and says, where is the Rebbe? Where's the Rebbe? So what do you need him for? He says, he left town. He says, I need to see him. So he runs, and he sees the Rebbe after a day get into a river, puts a little napkin on the water, sits on it, and he's sailing in the water. And he doesn't know what to do. So he takes a napkin, puts it on the water, sits, and he's sailing on the water too. So he's catching up with the Baal Shem Tov down the river. And the Baal Shem Tov says, what are you doing? He says, Rebbe, I need to ask you a question. I lost the marking on the pages of the Siddur. And the Rebbe says, how did you get here? He says, I put the napkin on the water and I came here. He said, you don't need
the markers. That's right. I love it. It's great.
So I was reminded of that when you spoke about the rabbi flying. So you met Simon Jacobson, and, you know, it's very easy to have an epiphany, but the discipline, once you make a commitment, how do you, what kept you from flipping the switch off a little bit, doing what you want, then flipping the switch on and say, now I'm back?
I don't know how many I've had in my life. Maybe there's, I don't know, 3. But an epiphany is, by its nature, a transformation of self, of your thinking. So there's no desire to flip the switch off. There's just a desire to find more switches to turn on.
But the habits that we have, you know, are...
Oh, yeah. There's all sorts of... You're talking about sins.
No, about having a little compromises on your decisions. You know, I'm not going to have mincha today because I'm in the middle of something. You know, I'm doing it tomorrow. It's not a sin. It's just a little compromise.
Yeah, like a little abstention. Look, I'm no tzaddik, I can tell you that. I don't fly or sit on a water napkin. So I guess I don't have the intention to flip off a switch. I don't have the desire to do so. I kind of liken it to writing a song, if I may. It's not that I have this brilliant idea. It's that I have this great desire to express myself. And the desire itself is the beginning and the continuance of the manifestation.
So for you, becoming a Jew is like an accomplishment. It's like being a musician, being a rock star. It's an evolved state, a higher state that you are. It manifests what you wanted to become.
I think it's a little different. I think when something becomes a desire, it becomes part of your will. You don't need confidence. You don't need a lot. Whatever you have just imagine you have a strong desire for something that's inappropriate. You don't need to have confidence. It's just there. Or you want to eat this delicious hamburger, let's say on a smaller scale. You don't have to intellectualize about it.
So you say the good things are just the same. It's a desire.
Yeah. It's a will. It's a desire. I don't have to create an intellectual, buttressing for the love I have for my children and grandchildren.
Of course. It's clear. You put it clear. I wish that we could package it and.
I wish I could package it. As I said, all this is aspirational.
Yeah. But it kind of jives. It makes sense. I like that. I heard you mention that it's critical to you that your family carry the legacy of Judaism and to carry the legacy of what our people have to teach the world. Can you elaborate? Why?
This is a very theological idea, I suppose. Does a person carry with him or her the idea that they are given a purpose, even whether by God or not? I mean, do you carry with you a sense of purpose? And that's a distinguishing, I think, mark between people. Is there something that drives you and is fundamental to your essence and then therefore to your behavior? So yeah, it's imperative that we, my wife and I, pass these values on to our children. And the fact that we have is likely one of the most gratifying parts of my entire life.
Are your children following up in your Jewish, involvement and practice?
Yeah, they all are.
I can imagine how proud it makes you feel. Peter, you believe that it's inevitable, that's what you've said on many occasions, it's inevitable to see God's handiwork in the world. This led you to your faith. The question is, why isn't it inevitable to more people? But more importantly, why should it make a person observant? There are plenty of people who believe there's a creator, but they don't see the need to follow in any religious practice. So it's a double question.
Well, I don't know if I would use the word inevitable. It was providential that all the pathways of my life led me to a circumstance where, let's say, this spark in me was activated or animated. This idea, which is never fully embraceable, I don't think. It's in competition with the physical world, this idea that God is constantly creating the world, that every moment is miraculous. That's an idea that we strive for and only occasionally accept. Maybe at the birth of a child, or our child, or something that happens at the tragic inverse of such a situation, or meeting a certain person, like these epiphanies. So it wasn't inevitability, at least on my part. It wasn't inevitable that with my mind and so on, I would have achieved this. It was a gift that was given to me. I just want to clarify that. And once given and received, it seemed inevitable for me on a personal level that I would carry through with that I would seek to pursue these traditions, these mitzvot. Mm-hmm. And none of it is empirically provable. None of it is scientific. People that have these discussions about God's reality or something, and it's not possible. Just as like you can't make music with paint. Paint is a light refracting material.
Yeah.
And you can't paint with sound waves. They're two different things.
So you had this incident, this event when you met Simon. Do you think that it was conscious or subconscious search that you had? Do you think it's an accident? If you didn't meet him, would you still have found yourself on that side of Jewish practice?
It's hard to say, but I mean, it was, I was asked by this record producer, a really great friend of mine named Kenny Vance, as the other part of the Simmons story. And he said, I know all these famous people. He knows Diane Keaton. He knows Woody Allen. But tonight, I'm going to go to this religious Jew in Brooklyn, and would you like to come with me? So I was like, he thought maybe this would be something I wouldn't want to do. I was very invested in it. My dad had just died the year before. My mind was really on these kind of metaphysical ideas.
So you were ready. You were prepped.
Yeah, I was prepped probably from earliest childhood.
And now you were primed.
Yeah, and had I gone to, let's say, certain religious schools, I probably would have run from it.
Like many of our children.
Yeah, it was auspicious that I would come to this completely of my own volition as an adult.
Yeah, it's easier this way, I guess. Do you know what Simon is known for, besides being a great thinker and having a podcast and all talking about Zohar and do you know what he's known for?
Well, aside from liking his wife's food and everything, and being a poor cleaner of a kitchen.
So it comes to a point where I can tell you something you may not know. Or maybe
Let's see if I do, yeah.
So Simon, for about 18 years, he is what's called a chozer.
Yes,
He on Shabbos, because the Rebbe couldn't record it, he would listen with 4 other people, and he memorized word by word what the Rebbe had said.
I would watch him in Crown Heights in 770 doing it, and I was there on Saturday night, Motzei Shabbat, when he was unspooling it, which is pretty.
It's
uncanny,
kind of amazing, right?
I said to him once, "Wow, it's just so amazing that you can remember that." He was like, brush that off because that's the least of it. That's nothing. He goes, when the Rebbe spoke, he wasn't just, freestyling. Everything was from the massive canon of Jewish thought and literature. Right. So Simon had to find and footnote everything. And he told me once, he goes, look, here's all the archives of the things that the Rebbe said. He goes, look at this. I wrote to him, I don't understand this one thing. It's all in Yiddish and red pencil. And the Rebbe writes circles the whole page. He goes, the Rebbe had a sense of humor. He goes, what did you understand? And it was all wrong. He goes, but that was the work of tracking down everything he'd said in an era before AI.
I like that you could identify and recognize the great moments that you came across. I think it's one of the greater learning lessons that most of us don't have because of the noise around us. You cannot tell the difference between what's important and what's not. But if you know yourself, as you say you did or have, you automatically can focus on the things that are important.
Yeah, I mean, I had so many experiences that was not due to any dint of my own doing, really, is that, I played with a bunch of bands, rhythm and blues bands and black performers and this calypso reggae band when I was a kid. And all those experiences were not tangential to this path. They were instrumental. They were
that explains everything now.
Yeah, it does. I mean, they were good, beautiful people, soulful people who gave me so much encouragement.
They sensitized you.
Yeah, and brought out something of my essence.
You were raised in a conservative household, yet you came to immerse yourself in orthodoxy, praying 3 times a day. And it's kind of, as an autodidact that you describe yourself as an individualist, it's kind of 2 things that clash, how to, align yourself with the regiment when you are such an individualist and you've always done unusual things. Do you think that your Judaism is a way of being different?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And then I can talk about the regimented behavior as a conduit to freedom. It's the only one that exists. It's the only path to freedom, by the way, is to create these boundaries for yourself. Any musician knows that. But, rock and roll was presumed to be this subversive kind of thing. And it's really not. I mean, it's just especially now, a very corporatized thing. And even if it was subversive, it wasn't saying, well, what are you subverting and what are you going to? Judaism, in a way, the word subversive has a very kind of negative connotation. I'm not using it like that, but it is by its nature subverting almost all of popular culture. I mean, it certainly chose not to follow Christianity, way back when, Baal Peor, all the idolatrous practices. It's a people who denied a lot. And denial is also part of finding things. What do you take? What's kosher for you? What's not? Which notes do you choose and which notes do you leave out?
So Abraham was the first subversive.
Subversive, 100%. The whole world was on one side. And I get letters from people today from my writings and so on, well, I get two kinds of writing letters to me. Peter, I don't get you now. How could you become, you were this songwriter with all this emotional, and now you're a genocidalist. Like, yeah, I mean, that's a thing. And they're truly curious. What was the change? There was no change. I'm just, if you kill my people, you're going to see another side of me. Well, as I mentioned, you're talking about freedom in structure, essentially, the regimentation of Judaism. And sometimes it's overwhelming for me, but, you sit down at a piano and it only has 88 keys. There's not a billion. There's not unlimited keys. And there's a certain way you have to play it. There's certain notes that you need to choose, and you can choose otherwise, but you need to know the fundamentals. And if you want to be free and wild and just make music circumscribed by rules, man, too many rules, then you'll sit down at the piano and we'll say, well, let me hear what you got. And you'll have absolutely nothing. And the rules of having a faithful marriage, why can't I have like all sorts of different types of people, No. That's just touching people at the same tawdry level. You only have multiplicity through the one wife. You find yourself and all these different characteristics that you bring out through the trust that you create with one another.
I love this. Basically, what you're saying is to be able to play good music, you have to learn how to play first. So in order to be a free human being who writes his own music, you have to first know the rules of living, and that's what the mitzvot are for.
To be free, you have to contain yourself.
That includes putting tefillin in the basement while smoking pot?
Yeah, where did I write that somewhere? I love that. Yeah, well, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I was doing that surreptitiously, lest my mom think I was crazy. Yeah. She could probably handle the pot, but I'm not sure the tefillin would have made it.
You recognize that you have a unique place, a comfortable place between secular and frum world. You're a connector, an ambassador. Keeping Shabbos and kosher on the road is a form of Kiddush Hashem. But there's a price for it. And you said often that everything that we do that is worthwhile, be it right, just, and moral, often there's a price for it. The right things don't come cheaply. See, you are a Rebbe now. We quote you. Can you tell us what was the price that you had to pay and how did you reconcile with it?
The price that I paid was 1 penny. And I'm not even sure what I bought. For that penny.
It's a metaphor. I know that. Instead of playing for thousands of people, you play for hundreds of people. I know that too. But what did you feel personally that you paid? Because the fact that you played for 100 instead of 1,000 may not have felt like a price. What was for you?
Well, it feels like a price, but it's infinitesimally small compared to what I've gained. So therefore, the price, in quotes, is insignificant compared to the value of the purchase, let's say.
You were always at peace with that.
Look, I have children and grandchildren. I have great relationships with them and my wife and friends, and I make music, I make records, I play. I mean, thank God for all this. There wasn't this idea that I underwent some sort of horrible pain and suffering for my allegiance to my Judaism is just, it's not a real thing. And I think that's a thing that people who are wondering about Judaism and, well, what is this? What kind of damage will this do to me? What happens when I go to a minyan every morning? It's so boring. It's so long. I wrote a piece today, which may come out on Substack tomorrow, and it's about working out in the gym, which I do. I try to stay fit mostly because of vanity. But I know exactly what happens when I work out. I feel better. My muscles are stronger. But when I daven and do all these mitzvahs, I can't tell you categorically what the result is. It's a vague feeling. But I know that it is nonetheless even more powerful than simply working out.
I like that. I can see how this can make young people kind of say, I'm going to try me one of those things,
Well, why do you have to be, I mean, I'm not young anymore. I'm an old man now.
No, but you are not the white hair rabbi who told people where the tzitz is. You're a rock star. You're free. You represent something that young people identify with. That's why I'm putting you on the spot.
No, I like that. I like the spot. I mean, the Rebbe, when I met him, was in his 80s. The Rebbe had a beard and he was old.
Yeah.
And I found him to be, to use a colloquial term, one of the coolest people I ever met. And that's a very understated and unworthy term. He was somebody that understood what was going on in the world.
On that note, on the, gap that people have between connecting to what's valuable and not, some argue that when people in the West stopped going to church, the vacuum was filled with consumer capitalism and its likes. TikTok is warping our moral codes. Porn has ruined our sex lives. People are depressed, nihilistic, and increasingly illiterate. But lately it's been reported that there has been a boom in religiosity in the West. Is God the answer to today's nihilism?
Well, I mean, you can't give a short answer, yes or no, because God, first of all, is ineffable. And which God are you talking about?
I'm not talking God as the coach of the team. We're talking about us as using God.
I think that there are certain movements in, let's say, Christianity today that are becoming very ardently anti-Jewish. Mm-hmm. So, and that's what I'm thinking about when I can't give a straight answer. Christianity itself has presumed itself to be the usurpation of Judaism.
Of course.
And so the civility that one sometimes sees is in individuals. I think as a religion, there is a conflict between the two. There's certainly bridges, and the bridges that are made are things that are flat out from Torah itself. The answer to the question, what would be better for people than being transfixed by TikTok, which is, I spent some time teaching and be involved at the United States Army War College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And they're not kidding around about China. They're not just saying, oh, China. This is a means of warfare, psychological warfare that they're deeply engaged in, and other countries. And this is a great way of warring. The United States is probably doing the same thing, psychological operations, but without firing a shot, you're creating disunity among our citizens and sowing hatred. Al Jazeera is doing the same thing.
Russia, China.
China.
The bots that spread,
And if you don't have a Shabbat in your life, whatever that means, I'm talking literally, but even figuratively, a way of wresting yourself away from the bots, from the very trivial, from the mercantile, then you're going to be a person who is distant from his own essence.
I think it's a good idea to sell to the army.
The army knows a lot of things. They know, one, that you, at least in the leadership, that you need to start reading things that you don't believe in, that you don't agree with. That's a huge point, that you should be able to argue in a Lincoln Douglas debate a side that you don't take, so that you understand where people are coming from, that so you understand the others, and therefore you can either war against them in an intelligent way, or you can create bridges. It's essential that you know what people are thinking.
The debates, the famous debates that Jews have engaged.
Yeah, this is the Talmud. And this is why people ask, well, what's the secret of the Jews? Aside from the fact that we were given the Torah, this built-in eugenics program. It's a harsh word, but, basically when I met Simon and Shandy Jacobson, I understood, you take the brightest person and marry that person to the other brightest person, and, that's how it goes.
And the Christians, they had the opposite. Let's take the brightest person, make sure he has no kids, so he cannot pass along the baton.
It's a problem. It's a recognized issue.
It's this crazy thing. You associate your gifts coming from somewhere. You believe that it's easier for an artist to feel spiritual, yet we don't see many of them going your route.
Well, many artists aren't Jewish.
But spiritual, I'm talking about not just smoking pot and doing Hare Krishna. We're talking about Jesus or Buddha or Abraham.
No, I'm talking about musicians who are really good. I hardly have met one that I would consider an atheist, even if they don't use the word God. All the musicians that I know that are good have a very strong spiritual center. Now, whether that leads them to lead a totally moral life or not, that's a whole other story. But they would be interested in this conversation. They would be conversant in this conversation, even though they weren't, from or church-going people necessarily, because they understand the power of music, which is because it's not a temporal thing. It's not a graspable thing. It's a spiritual thing.
It's magic. They're basically little gods who create, so they understand what creation is. I just don't see them as practicing not the mitzvahs or tefillin or going to church. It's just practicing their moral role as...
Well, how many of these people do you know personally?
Well, I'm talking about the stereotype.
Yeah, and the stereotype is just that. It's a stereotype. And then there's the whole musicians, this whole wave of anti-Zionism, which is exactly anti-Judaism. There's a need in famous people. I mean, I wasn't ever really famous, but I had a little homeopathic dose of it. And I understand the need. If this becomes inflated, and thank God it wasn't inflated in me, I may not have been able to handle it. But if it comes inflated, it becomes like oxygen for people. It becomes their raison d'etre. They become warped by it, because what's warping is when you're on a stage, and whether there's 100 or 20,000 people clapping for you, that's not a natural human connection. Yeah. That's a form of adulation that you can easily become addicted to.
Very few people can manage this. Peter, you've written a number of books, a children's book, a creativity book, and the most recent one, which I bought and I indulged in, Suspended by No String, which is an autobiographical poetry book of sorts. Can you tell us about your books, about this book, and can you read maybe a favorite piece, poem, or something?
All right. I'll read this one. I just picked it. This one is called Adjustments. A woman I love once asked me how I could have faith in God when we live in a world as frightening and uncertain as ours, a world where evil shows its face every day. It's both a good question and an impossible one to answer. Because she was in great pain, my best response was to hold her, to hear her, to be with her, without words, without explanations. I think back on that encounter from time to time, and with no one looking to me for answers, I too will raise questions about my own faith in a world that is indeed full of fear and uncertainty. Those questions are also unanswerable. Even now, God is in some way responsible for my fingers tapping out these sentences on the keyboard of my computer, for each of the raindrops falling on the rooftop outside my window, and for every feather of every pigeon seeking shelter under the eaves. Even the so-called normal things are impossible to answer for. The question of faith in God comes down to more practical matters. How do I cope with the not knowing that surrounds me at every moment? How do I reconcile myself to the fact that I will never understand many of the things that I take as a given? Air, for example, or light, or water, or the ability to communicate my thoughts, or to give life to a child who can give birth to a child of her own. Where do I file my uncertainty about everything I experience? How can I accustom myself to the nearly supernatural phenomenon of my own consciousness? Or do I just ignore the fact that my existence and the existence of the entire universe is a miracle? Faith is difficult. It isn't about belief. It's about adjusting to being human.
I'm going to do a quick rapid fire. If you're not an artist, you'd be
An oceanographer.
If you're not a Jew, you'd be
A converted Jew.
What will it take for you to realize that America has turned too anti-Semitic for you to live here?
When a left or right-wing government that's very far to either side is evidently anti-Jewish and dangerous.
Institutionalized anti-Semitism. Yeah. What do you have left to accomplish?
The same stuff I've been accomplishing since I was a kid.
You stopped wearing tzitzis flying onto the stage. What has changed?
What has changed is it looks better with my pants.
Studying Torah, who are the characters that touch you the most?
King David, I think, most. Abraham, because he was this subversive that we talked about.
Musicians are subversive people.
Yeah, that's it, I guess.
Well, speaking of music, I usually ask people to think something that is significant from their parents, grandparents, Tish, or whatever, or anything that comes close to your heart.
Yeah, we didn't really sing a lot of Jewish songs. I didn't know any Zmirot or Nigunim, but I did learn this song from my grandma Rose, which, how's the guitar sound?
Magic. All of a sudden I feel home.
Einschläf, mein Kind, dein Egelach, annehme nicht mein Chayes Aros. Dort bei dein Oletin Wiegelach, dort sitzt auch dein Mutter in Wein. Sie kluckt in Wein, wo sie hat dich geboren, in Sursen, in nemmer nicht in mir. Ich hab dein Vater verloren, bist die nur ein Manatol gewesen, bist die nur ein Manatol gewesen.
Beautiful. Do you want to tell me what does it mean to you? What does the song mean?
Yeah, well, that's a song that my grandma used to sing me when I was a kid. All my siblings, she would sing this over and over. And the story was that she was about 12 years old, living in a shtetl near Tulcea, Romania, and she was babysitting, let's say, for a young mother whose husband had just died of some disease, and the daughter was now sick with the same disease and likely would die soon. And the woman was just, this was a real folk song. She just sang it. She made it up. And the first lines are, Ein Schlaf, mein Kind, dein Egelach. Sleep, my child, your eyes. And go to sleep, and talks about her husband. And I just took a transliteration of the song at one point when I was young. I don't know what all the words, I'm sure I did not get the Yiddish right at all, but some of the words, you know Yiddish, right?
I spoke it when I was young.
Could you get any of the words?
Schlaf, my kind, schleif, as one. Yeah. We all end up schleifing at some point.
Yeah, well, it's time to take a nap at some point today.
Peter Pesach Mordechai, it's understatement of the day to say that I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's great. I had a great time too, Sally. Thank you for pushing me and nudging me.